Thank you, ma'am, and appreciate the member from Carmel yielding time to the gentleman from Memphis. This is unfortunate. Mr. Kington, in presenting his side of the budget, was almost apologetic about WIC, and I can understand that and why he would be apologetic. This is a sacred portion of the budget to people on my side of the aisle, and it should be sacred to all people in America, newborn mothers, babies, and children under 5 who are identified as nutritionally at risk, and yet we are cutting that budget 13%. There's good reason you'd be almost ashamed to introduce it, and the way he introduced it showed concern, thought it was difficult, and it is. The fact is, some people talk about in difficult economic times that everybody has to tighten their belt, and everybody ought to tighten their belt equally. Well, what about the obesely wealthy? They're not being asked to tighten their belt at all. In fact, there's not a belt big enough to go around their obesely successful selves. They are doing great. And it seems like in this budget, there are only about 2 things that seem to be sacred. One is tax cuts for the rich. The Bush tax cuts that were created when there was a surplus created by a Democratic Congress and a Democratic President, Bill Clinton, and those tax cuts were passed because we had a surplus. Now we've got a great deficit, and they're being extended. They're being extended, and even to people making over $1 million a year, there's rejection of having them pay more so that mothers, babies, and children under 5 identified as nutritionally at risk can get the WIC payments. There's something wrong here. Economists estimate that for every $1 invested in WIC savings, there are savings between $1.50 and $3 in health costs just in the first 60 days after an infant's birth. Talk about a return on investment. However, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle obviously think this return isn't good enough, and so we should gut the program, just like what they want to do with Medicare, until it can no longer function adequately to serve so many of the Americans who need it the most. This measure funds the WIC program at $686 million less than the current level, which is the equivalent of kicking off 475,000 eligible mothers, infants, and children. If I have an additional minute.
Yield additional minute.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
Thank you. It's equivalent of kicking 475,000 eligible mothers, infants, and children off one of the most cost-effective programs in our country. It'll cost Tennessee over $1 million. If we get rid of tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires for 1 week, we could pay for the entire WIC program for a year. I cannot see this. It seems to me it's distorted values, and I would ask that they reconsider and put the WIC program back to its basic level. Thank you. I yield back the remainder of my time.